going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our live stream for this week's Valero Texas Open. Gonna get you guys ready for all of your exposure, whether it's over there on the DFS side. We'll talk about some strategy heading into lock. We'll also go through some prop and betting stuff out there towards the end, whether it's an underdog or prize picks or any outright bets. You guys want my take on out there as well. So feel free to go ahead, hit me with any questions that you've got. We'll go through those out here in just a few minutes. But first, we're going to take a look at the weather report, how that'll impact play over the first few days. And we'll also say hi to all of you down there in the chat. Looks like we got Joseph, David wins a lot down there as well. Hopefully you guys are having a fantastic Wednesday. We got a Illini Fed, MN Holla, Nick as well. Obviously, you got to have LSU Nick down in your chat. You're going to be one of the big golf channels out there. You got Bart, Sean, Rev Cloud as well. Also, Brian down there in the chat. Hit me up with any questions that you have. And hey, if you haven't already said hi down there, go ahead and enter with the rest of the crew. But it started off with a look at the weather over the first few rounds, because if you're going to have any questions about it, I'm going to direct people back to the beginning. So in terms of your weather out there for Thursday, it looks pretty predictable, but Friday is going to be where any sort of edge comes in. So for the tomorrow, it looks pretty calm out there in the middle section of the day. Maybe the last 4 hours of the AM wave, you've got next to no sustained wind. This, of course, is the HRRR model that we have up right here. And then on the afternoon wave, the first maybe 3.5 hours of that side also looks pretty calm, but maybe the first hour and a half of the AM wave, also the last 3, maybe even 3.5 hours of the PM wave, you're going to have some sustained winds that kick up. And along with that sustained winds, you've got some wind gusts getting closer to 15, even 18 miles an hour over there in the PM side of things. So maybe a slight advantage tomorrow for some of the guys going off in the latter half of the first wave. So, some of your late AM wave guys, and then maybe some of your early PM guys that can avoid most of those heavy winds. Like if you're one of the last guys in the PM wave, right, going off closer to 2 p.m. local time, a lot of your round is going to be on those windier conditions. Whereas if you're one of the guys going off closer to noon, only about half your round, or maybe even just a third of your round is going to be played in those sort of conditions. And it's the same thing over there at the AM wave, right? If you can find some of those later starters over there for Thursday, maybe you can avoid some of those sustained winds. But outside of those small little edges out there on either side, I don't see a massive advantage on Thursday. But where everything kind of gets thrown out of whack is going to be on the Friday side, because at least compared to this HRRR model here, it looks like the winds might actually die down as the day goes on. At least that's what it kind of looks like over here early with this HRRR. But if we go to some of the other forecasts, you'll see that they've got some rain out there on a Friday, and even some thunderstorms in some of these forecasts. So you can see on this Meteor Blue, they've got thunderstorms over there for Friday morning, which, of course, if there's thunder out there in those cells, would cause a delay of play, which is why I think it's a tough slate to really use the weather all that much. GFS model also has some thunderstorms over there on Friday, but let's say that it's just some rain, maybe some wind that comes through on Friday. I could see the AM PM guys getting a pretty big edge, because over here on Thursday, I think it'll be pretty close, but maybe a slight advantage to going out early. I already talked about the fact that they have slightly less wind out there from the PM wave, but it's also going to get pretty firm and fast when it's 90 degrees out there in the afternoon. So that would also be another factor to go out there and consider. But over here on Friday, the wind, if it does die down, like a lot of these forecasts are calling for, the AM PM guys, the guys going out late over there on Friday, could get a little bit of a double whammy, right? Slightly better conditions on that side. Same thing over there for Thursday, but that's assuming that there's no sort of delay. That's assuming that they're playing throughout all of those winds, and also assuming, you see there's a lot of assumptions, right, out here with this sort of an edge. We'll put that over there in quotes. All of that has to hold up, and the forecast has to also hold up out there for a whole 48 hours for you to get that sort of an AM PM edge. So personally, I am hardly playing the weather this week. I have 80% of my lineups played without any sort of a weather edge, and then I'm taking 10% and stacking it towards the AM PM guys, and then I'm also taking 10% and I'm stacking it towards the complete other side of it, because I don't think there's really anything definitive out here between these different forecasts. And if you feel differently about it, then for sure go out there and play all those certain narratives that you guys want to. But I'm just giving you guys my side of things, right? My 2 cents out there on the slate. And That is that the weather isn't definitive enough to go out there and lean into it too much in one way or the other. So it's going to be much more of a game theory slate for me, trying to find some of my course fits, some low-owned diamonds in the rough there in that 6 and 7K range, to try and leverage against the rest of the field. Which, speaking of, we're going to go ahead and bring up her projections right now. So this will be the perfect time, by the way, to get to any of those questions. We're going to go through some of those down there in the chat right now, and then go through a few other things here together. So one of those will be ownership towards the top end of the board. As you'll see on my projection sheet over here, all the ownership from 8K plus is going to be completely uncensored, so you won't have to ask about any of the players up there. And we're also going to talk about some outright bets, some top 10s that went out there and entered as well, on top of some of the exposure that we went through together on Monday. So you get a little bit of a better idea of some of the other pieces of exposure that I'm getting to, as well as some of the things I'm looking for heading into lock. But before we do that, let's catch up on all those questions down in chat. And yeah, like I said, hit me up with anything that you're curious about. So first question, going back to Dave Favor before, is a question about Manacero and his course fit here. So I would say that it's a better course fit than the last few weeks for him for sure, Dave. He's a shorter guy coming over from the DP World Tour, but a great iron player, especially out there with the wedges and shorter clubs. And on the DP World Tour, you put him on a course that's sub 7,000 yards, but you get quite a lot over there on that side of the pond. He dominates. He's one of the best players that you could possibly have. So this isn't a short golf course. It is still 7,400 yards, in fact, but it is a little bit of a better fit than what you had for the last two events. So it's trending the right direction. And hey, he made the cut at those sort of golf tournaments, so probably playing even better than what those stats would indicate. Illini says, shout out to DGen75 and giving him some good vibes. Cheers to that out there. Hopefully he's getting the health together and everything like that. And cheers to the big guy out there. What's going on, Nick? Happy Hoagie Week. I'm right there with you. Is Eric Cole a good course fit? So another question about whether he fits the golf course. So he said that he noticed the missed cut, but his form has been getting better. So yeah, it's another one of those tracks where you don't have to be an off the tee heavy player. And anytime you have an Andrew Landry out there on the defending champions list, when you have guys that are sub-tier drivers out there winning at this sort of golf tournament, then an Eric Cole could make a lot of sense. So yeah, he's a good course fit. Didn't have the best result out there last year, but he's out there in my player pool. Good iron player, kind of like what you had over there with Manacero, and good putter as well. And that can work around this sort of track. It's not the ideal course fit, but it can certainly work. So what's going on, Sean? Says, hope I'm having an awesome week. I am. Cheers to that. We actually have a little bit of a Crown and Coke in the cup. I just poured it before we got on here. This will actually be my first sip that we're taking of it. But cheers to everyone out there. I've already got all my lineups in, already got my prop slips in too. So we're celebrating a little bit. And you did have a question out there on Victor Perez. Let me go ahead and bring up the shots gain metrics while I get a sip of this. And I like him this week, partially because of how good this form looks. So let's find him here. I believe he's what, $7,100. And impressively, gaining across all four stat categories. And you guys know my go-to is always going to be that approach play, but he really doesn't have a weakness over that 12-round sample size. Now, last 24 rounds, it does come back down to earth just a little bit. And he's gaining into two ball striking categories like we care about the most. In the short game, it's not like it goes completely to shit, right, over that 24-round sample. So Victor Perez, another one of those European-style players, DP World Tour guy, just like Matteo Manacero, that fits this style of golf course quite well. And it's not so much the length that makes those kind of players make sense. It's the fact that accuracy matters around this sort of golf course. They've got natural areas in play. They've got some 2.5-inch rough, as opposed to 1-inch rough out there last week. Makes a difference when you're going out there and actually hitting fairways. What's going on, Rev Cloud? Said in Texas, so are we wave stacking? I am, but it's a really tough one to predict. So I'm kind of just splitting it down the middle and then playing most of my lineups without it. What's going on, Brian? Am I factoring in next week at all, guys that are in or out of the Masters? Not so much, Nick, because I think it's so hard to quantify. They're going to be players that are just here to go out there and get some reps, but it's hard to tell who those players are going to be. And if they go out there, they're getting their reps in, but they manage to be, let's say, 4 under through their first 12 holes or something, then their mentality is going to instantly switch. So I'm not that worried about it personally, but you know, if you have a strong take on a player when it comes to that sort of aspect, maybe you could use it to break a tie right out there between another player and your player pool. But outside of that, I'm not looking at it all that much. What's going on, Sites? What's going on, Prep Drone? What's going on, Ross, there as well? Oh, the weather. We love weather. Indeed, we do, right? Us golf degenerates. What's going on, Brant? Mike down there as well. And I appreciate the kind words. Alan says I'm the real MVP. No, you guys are the real MVP out there for supporting the channel, showing all the love that you guys do. Smash the like button, by the way, if you guys haven't already. Do I like Ryder this week? So I like the form, Dave, but I don't like the ownership and the kind of steam that we're seeing on Sam Ryder. He's personally the kind of guy that I play in the 6K range when no one else is playing Sam Ryder. And the reason for that is that he's extremely volatile. He's not the kind of guy that will go on like a 2-month run with the recent form. He's the kind of guy that kind of pops out of nowhere, maybe for a week or two at a time, and he'll give you a couple top 25 finishes. And the thing about Sam Ryder that we've seen out there on tour that makes him attractive out there in GPPs is that he's shown us the ability to get into contention, right? Nearly won the Farmers out there a couple years ago, and he's shown us the ability to the top 10. Not consistently out there on tour, but a lot more than other guys down there in the 6K range. Now, this week, he's not in the 6K range, right? He's a little bit more expensive than that, and he's a lot higher owned than what we typically see for Sam Ryder. So do I like him for this sort of golf course? Yes. I like the form out there as well, but I don't like him enough where I would play him as chalk there in that 7K range. So I'm personally staying away from him. He said, love the show and thanks for all I do. Where can I buy my book? So it's on Amazon, Rick. It is called Decide to Win. That'll be the easiest way to do so. But if you want to send me a DM on X/Twitter, Rick, I can send you some information to find it a little bit easier. Wait, what is an outright bet? Hey, Nick, don't even say that. I know you enter a ton of outrights out there yourself. So don't hit us with that BS down there. You know what an outright is. Do I like Siwoo or other guys that need to win to get into the Masters? So that narrative to me could help you break some ties, kind of like what I was saying with Nick before, but it's not something that's putting me onto a player in particular. So not really a big part of my process. That's just a personal choice, right? If it is going to be a big part of your process, then that's totally fine. It's just that I maybe don't have enough information to go out there and do that myself. Some of you guys out there may have better information on that than me. Joe says, you took Berger, Woodlands, Gerard, and Bud. See any winners there? So I like a lot of those players. In fact, 2 of those 4 I've got as over 25% plays out there in my player pool this week. And Gerard's one of them. We're going to talk about him quite a bit. You guys probably saw him on my show over there on Monday. And then Berger's the other one. We're going to talk about him here in just a minute. So yeah, I think you're on the right sort of player there, Joe. I'm really going to give you any pushback on any of those 4. So thoughts on Ludwig. So let's talk about the ownership up top. So this is a great little segue into the top end of the board. Ludwig is a high upside player, probably just the best player that we have in this field. However, it's not the best course fit for him. I said the same thing before the RSM Classic a few years ago. What did he do? He went out and won, and it wasn't even close out there at that sort of golf tournament. Guys like Ludwig, course fit almost doesn't matter to that sort of player because he's just that much better than everyone else that he's teeing it up against, that he could win at a course that doesn't fit his sort of game. So I'm always for a Ludwig Gobert, but I was kind of hoping that he'd be lower owned because he's the most expensive player that we have in this kind of slate. Tommy Fleetwood played really well here last year. His form's also top 5 out there in the field. So I thought that there was a chance that Luddy would be a little bit overlooked, but I've still got him at about 20% projected ownership like you can see there. So I'm totally fine with using them. I'm not going to give you any pushback whatsoever when it comes to playing Gobert, but I was kind of hoping for him to be closer to, let's say, 15, 16% ownership, and at least in my projections. And, I by no means have the crystal ball on exactly what's going to happen, but if he comes in around this 20% mark that I have him at, I think that he's like a 6 out of 10 for a play. Like, he's solid. He could win. He's in my opinion, by far the best player that we have in this sort of field. The unfortunate aspect is that you have a few guys around him that I have a soft spot for, and I've got to leave some of those behind the paywall. I will say that of those guys that are in that $10,000 range, and I'm playing 2 of them, and one of them is not Corey Connors. I'm not playing a 26% owned Corey Connors, which, speaking of chalk up here towards the top end of the board, your highest owned players would be Corey Connors, as we just talked about there, at about 26%. And Akshay Bhatia, I've got it close to 22% ownership. You'd say that Denny McCarthy is also pretty popular, especially when you consider the 2 guys below him in salary. So $100, $200 cheaper are half the ownership of what you have there with the Denny McCarthy. And then I'd say guys like Bud Cauley, even a Siwoo Kim there at 15%. So I know we had the question about Siwoo Kim a little bit earlier. That would be the drawback with some of these players, is that they're the most popular options towards the top. Now, as you can see here with the Denny McCarthy, I'm not fading every single one of those players. Now, I did spill the beans on Coco, and you probably could have guessed that if you followed the channel for quite some time. You guys will probably know that he's not my favorite player out there in the PGA Tour. So if he's going to be chalky, there's no chance I'm going out there and using him myself. But guys like a Denny McCarthy, who I'll mention this top 10 bet here in just a minute, I'm going to have a few guys at close to 20, maybe even over 20% of my lineups, but they're going to be few and far in between on this sort of slate. This isn't a super strong field. I would argue that there's not really anyone on this slate that is worthy of being like 30% owned. And no one's 30%, the highest guy was over there with Corey at about 26%. But even these guys that are in that like 25, 26% range, you would say that nobody's worthy of being that sort of chalk. So if I'm going to play a guy like Denny here, it's got to be one of my favorite plays of the entire week, which he is, right? I took him for a top 10 bet over there at plus 325. I've got a lot more confidence in him than a lot of other people do over here for this kind of week. So I say all of that to kind of point out that if you're going to play somebody up here at over 20%, really be sold on them, right? Think of them very highly, right? Have a reason for playing somebody at over that 20% mark. If you're trying to find a few guys to go out there and round out your player pool, right? Go out there and make sure you have enough players to submit your set of 50 to maybe 150 lineups on your optimizer. Don't be clicking guys like Corey Connors, Akshay, those kind of guys as your last man in. Like, sure, if they're one of the first guys that you're adding to your player pool, then play them. You can get away with that by differentiating elsewhere, right? You've got 4 or 5 other spots to go out there and get that leverage to the rest of the field. But if you're looking for your last few players in, that's where you don't make that sort of mistake, right? When you're trying to get those last few players in, take a shot on other guys up here. And like, for example, Hideki Matsuyama is a step down in ownership than some of those top tier players. He's won recently. He's one of, if not the best player that you have in this kind of field. Like, it's him and Aubert, right? Up there towards the top in terms of talent level. Why not take a shot at him at 16%? Like Keegan Bradley, El Capitan, as somebody referred to him earlier this week, $9,500. Like, he's been playing beautiful golf. Top 5 recent form ranking out there in Keegan. Why not take a shot on him? You've got a Tony Finau at nearly 10% ownership over here in that 8K range. There are guys down here that if you're looking for a last minute or a last few players up here towards the top end of the board, look to those sort of players. That would be my advice in that kind of scenario. The chalk, you're going to have to find your conviction plays to go out there and play, which for me, a lot of it comes down to modeling my top outrights, that sort of thing out there for any given week. But you can follow your own process for that, right? Your studs up top should be your studs. Just commit to them. If you're going to have a guy at 20, 25% ownership, you need to be playing them in at least 35% of your lineups. I say at least 35% for somebody around 20%, because I'm usually looking for at least like 1.5x leverage. So if you're playing them in like 35% of lineups, maybe you don't have a full 2x leverage that a lot of people will call for, but I don't live and die by the 2x leverage rule. I will always go out there and adapt it out there to certain players. Up top, I get closer to 1.5x leverage on a lot of the studs that I'm playing. But down low, with guys down there in that 6K range, it might only be like 1.5% owned. I mean, I'll have 6, 7, sometimes even like 10x leverage on those sort of players. So, I think that people are kind of too stuck in their ways when they come to that 2x rule, especially when it comes to these studs towards the top end of the board. Because, for example, if you're playing a Corey Connors this week, which I don't think it's my favorite play. The reason for that, by the way, is that to go out there and pay off a 10K price tag, you don't have to win in this sort of event, but you've probably got a top 3, top 5 at the very least. And I've been very critical of Corey Connors as a DFS play in the past because he's really good at finishing top 20, top 10. I mean, he's like one of the most dependable players in the world when it comes to those top 20 finishes. But in a 10K player, you need that top 5 upside. And historically, he has lacked that at pretty much every course but this track, right? He's had a lot of success around TPC San Antonio. So, you got to give credit where credit's due out there with Coco. But that's why I don't really like him as a play up top when, if you're going to get that 2x leverage, by the way, kind of getting to what I was trying to tie it into there, you got to play him in half your lineups, 50% to go out there and play a Coco. So sure, I don't love the play very much, but if you are going to play him, I will tell you, if 35%, 40% out there in Coco, you can get away with that, right? If it's close to that 1.5x leverage, heck, even if it's just a little bit below that, if you're 150 maxer, you shouldn't be afraid of that sort of thing. Let's talk about a few players I like up here, though. So first off, I'm going to have Daniel Berger and Denny McCarthy. I took both of them for top 10 bets, and they have the quintessential course fit for what we're looking around here. We want guys that are accurate off the tee, good iron players from 150 yards and in. Both of these guys are elite tier accuracy guys, top 25 players over here on the PGA Tour, and in that 150 range and in are also top 25 players on the PGA Tour. So that's why they model out so well, right? Both top 10 in that category. You'd expect that for studs up here towards the top end of the board, but the longer term stuff on Denny is just popping through the roof. I mean, look at that, right? Number one when it comes to TPC San Antonio ranking. Daniel Berger's just kind of killing it with consistency across the board when it comes to those rankings over there in my modeling. And yeah, top 10 bets, even if they are going to be like 15 to 20% in it, the guys that I'm playing at that sort of ownership are the guys that I think fit the golf course the best. And some of the other guys around him, like Akshay, I guess I'll just be fully transparent about it, right? I'm avoiding him out there in lineups this week, even as past champion last year. Clearly, he can get it done at this golf course. It's just that I don't think he's that much of a better play than guys like Berger McCarthy. In fact, long term, I think Berger McCarthy are better fits at this sort of golf course. So I'm just playing my guys, right? If Akshay was your guy this week, then commit to him, right? Just take him in at least 35% of your lineups and try and get it close to at least that 1.5x leverage. Another player I want to point out would be a JT Poston here, who the last few weeks has found his putter. That was a huge issue for Poston because before the last 2 weeks, he had lost strokes putting to the field in 7 straight events, which is kind of unheard of for JT Poston. He's one of the best putters that we've had out here on tour for the last 3-4 years. And now that he's finally found the flat stick, I think that's a huge sign of hope for things to come. By the way, during that 7-event stretch where he couldn't buy any putts, his iron play was some of the best that it's ever been for his career. So we're kind of getting two trends, kind of converging right here, right? The best iron play ever out there for JT Poston, really good course fit out there as well. I guess that's a third trend you can have out there coming back together, but also that putter returning to those elite level stats. So I think Poston is a sleeping giant. If we get all those things firing on at all cylinders at the same time, could be just an absolutely nuclear play there. So they're at about 11% ownership. He's not as low owned as guys like Burns, who, by the way, I bet outright. I love him for some leverage over there in the 8K range, but he's lower owned than guys like Bud Colley, even a Siwoo Kim up there that, sure, I get the intrigue with a Siwoo Kim. He's got elite tier course history here. I understand the Bud Colley chalk because he's number one in my modeling this week. So I can't completely dismiss him out there as a really good play. But is he 1.5 times more likely to go out there and succeed than guys like a Poston, a Tom Kim that are over here at like 11, 12% ownership? I would argue no, right? He's not worthy of being 1.5 times the ownership there. So that's why I'm choosing to make these sort of pivots. And though Tom Kim, right, we have him down here as kind of crossed out, he is a player that I'm using in some lineups. You can see the ownership does cut off here at 8K, as I mentioned before. Like you can see up here, all my projections are over there on my Patreon page. So if you guys want to find the Patreon, check out the link in the description of the video to go out there and join that. But for all the ownership in the 6 and 7K range, that is where you can find all of that. Before we talk about some diamonds in the rough, so a couple other top 10 bets I went out there and played, but some super cheap plays that I'm using for some leverage too. So what you're going to see with the last few plays that we talk about here is that for the most part, I think with the exception of Alex Smalley, who he's going to be pretty chalky, but I really like him for a top 10 bet. So that's why we're going to talk about Alex Smalley there. But with the exception of him, all these other guys that we're talking about are like 5% ownership and lower and are going to give you a chance to get different to the rest of the field. So mostly to talk about what I'm looking for in some of those sleepers, but we'll also go through some of your questions as well. So speaking of, did Grillo make my player poll this week? Was an okay value play for you last week? Yep. And then he said it was better than Gim and Novak. So he didn't make my player poll this week, Ross, but I wouldn't be against that sort of play. He's played well in Texas. He won the Charles Schwab Challenge a little bit later in the year, so the agronomy isn't quite the same, but it's a similar style golf course. It's like not short, but it's not overly long either. Same kind of profile where you want to be more accurate than long off the tee. I've got him at like a 6.5 out of 10. I think he's a decent play, Ross, but I didn't get there in my personal pool. So Hoagie or Gerard? So that's Gerard for me, but I'm playing both, Dave. So I like Gerard's form. He's got some of the best tee to green form of anyone in the world. Tom Hoagie is a great course fit. So it's more of a question of what you're trying to do with your lineup. If you're somebody that has enough leverage elsewhere, so let's say you've got a few guys that are sub 5% already, Gerard makes a whole lot of sense. He's the better play on paper. However, if you have some chalk elsewhere and, having a low owned pivot would be a little bit more helpful than somebody that's closer to 10, 12% ownership like Gerard. And that's where Hoagie makes a little bit more sense. Now, I call Hoagie a pivot. That's comparatively because even Hoagie has some ownership at that portion of the board. But compared to Gerard, I think it'll be quite a bit lower owned. Will I be willing to give out my favorite 10K play and up? So, I don't really have one that I like the most, so not really. I'd say if you're looking at that portion of the board, it's Jordan Spieth. I love Jordan this week. I think it's the convergence of form, event history. I think it's a convergence of lower ownership over there on the Jordan Spieth. So I know it's a kind of a cop-out answer, but yeah, it's Jordan there at $9,700, man. If I'm spending my money up top, it's on him. And I know it's crazy to say, but guys like Fleetwood, he's $10,700. Like Fleetwood's never won on the PGA Tour before. Like, let's not kid ourselves. I think Jordan Spieth's a lot closer to those guys on this sort of week than any other week out there. Like when you've got the Rorys, the Scotties up there, Jordan Spieth has no business being in that 9K range. But this week, I think it's a little bit more interesting. Hey, we said, what are my thoughts on Sam Stevens and Lee Hodges? So Lee Hodges, a little bit too popular out there for my liking. What you'll see with Lee Hodges, and the reason why he's getting that sort of attention, is he's top 25, or I guess top 30 technically, over there with his recent form ranking. And when you take a look at a lot of the course fit stuff, he fits a lot of the like common builds, like what people are looking for. You've got driving accuracy at a lot of the top of the people's list. He's a really good player from 150 yards and in. So if you're a model rat, right, somebody that's looking at the stats, right, trying to find a low-owned player, Lee Hodges would have been that guy. But unfortunately, enough people know about Lee Hodges this week, right? There's been enough content, enough people pumping him up out there in that ownership that I think he's going to be close to 10% owned. So that would be the issue with Lee Hodges, that I think he's getting a little bit too much steam. Odds on another last-minute withdrawal, 100% Scooter. And I say that to maybe try and reverse mush it, because I know that's painful for a lot of people out there. Thoughts on Keegan? I think he's an intriguing pivot there in that 9K range. And not much to say, because it's not like I love him. It's not like he's one of my top plays of the week, but a decent pivot in the 9K is about what I would say for him. How am I feeling about Decky and Cantlay this week? So Cantlay is like a 6 out of 10. I want to say the whole 10K range, I've got it like either a 6 or 7 out of 10 out there with my rankings this week. So maybe a 7 out of 10 for Cantlay, actually, a little bit more positive, I'd say. Hideki, the issue is the withdrawal risk. But if you're willing to take that on, you're okay. And he's got a PMT time. So there's a good chance, I shouldn't say a good chance, or there's at least a chance that if he withdraws, that it's after lock. You just got to be willing to eat that if you're going to play Hideki. Ryder is a great showdown play, always has a spike round in him. Yes, for sure. And if he struggles round one, he'd be the nuts play for round 2 showdown, because he's still the same player that we had heading into the week. People will jump ship after maybe he shoots like an even or +1 round out there for tomorrow. And then round 2 showdown is where all the donkeys get there with like a -4, -5 and him making the cut. So I'll have an eye on him for sure. Another great week for DFS. How am I feeling about Brian Harman? So yeah, what's going on, Jake? Welcome on in, my man. And I've got to say, Brian Harman wasn't at the top of my short list, but no pun intended there with the short list comment. But kind of like you have with some of those other guys off the tee, where like Manicero, these shorter guys, where it wasn't the best golf course fit for him. And Eric Cole's the same kind of thing, where they were at a lot of tracks that didn't fit their game. Now they're at tracks where I think it makes a lot of sense. So it's not even like the form was terrible for Brian. He's just nothing flashy out there with the finishes. But this could be the week for him. He's going to be low owned. So if you're looking for a player to get a little bit different with, I've seen a lot worse plays than Brian Harman. Now, I'm not playing him myself. I like to be fully transparent about that sort of thing. But he's a better play than most, I would say, at that portion of the board. Deep dive Captain Kirk for you. So let's go through the shots gained. That's normally my go-to with these sort of players. He's playing better recently than what we had for like the last 4-6 months, because the end of 2024 was rough to Kirk. I mean, a lot of missed cuts, a lot of like at best like T30s, that sort of thing over there on his record. But he's starting to gain on approach, which is really the main thing that we have to see for Captain Kirk. He's an extremely good iron player, extremely consistent in that category as well. And if he's not gaining over there with the irons, he's got no chance over there at a golf course. So he's another one of these guys where the recent events, especially like the big time events, and he plays in them, right, because of those wins over the last few years, they're not kind to Kirk. Like APIs, a little long for him. Players Championship played pretty long this year with some of the rain that they've done. A Houston Open, right? Some of these other guys that played at the Houston Open in the last few weeks, not the best course fit. So if they've gone by with this kind of form, I think it's rather impressive. And Kirk would be one of those players for sure. Thoughts on Tom Kim and Knapp? So I like both of them, Cody. Both of them are in my player pool. Guys that I will spill the beans on there. Tom Kim, one of the guys that I was looking to bet outright this week. I just couldn't find a good enough outright number. So I'll say that about him. Knapp, it's all about the form. Guy has been lighting up these overseeded greens. In fact, if we take a look at the overseeded putting for Jake Knapp, He's one of the best in the field, gaining close to 0.8 strokes per round. Denny McCarthy is number one in that category. Akshay Bhatia, I got to say, maybe there's a reason why he won this last year. So maybe I'm going to pay for fading him out there in my lineups. But guys like an app too, he's down here at only $7,900. That sort of putting's hard to overlook. So I'm playing him because of that. Does the big rig make the cut? So good old Harry Higgs, one of the most interesting guys in the world. I hope he does, man. But the form, especially with the iron form, I don't know if this number was correct, but my shots gained metrics have something wild over here for Harry Higgs. He's losing over 2.5 strokes per round on approach. I don't know if this is 100% accurate. For his sake, I hope it's not. But my shots gained metrics and the database I pull them from tends to be one of the most accurate out there. I usually have no issues when it comes to these. So yeah, tough scene for Harry, man. I hope he turns it around. He's one of my favorite guys out there for sure. Will be interesting to see if there's any improvement from Matty Fitz for sure with his new caddy. Oh, I didn't know he had a new caddy going. So, okay, that's a narrative that you could play. And you believe he was on the bag of Tom Kim. So, yeah, I don't have any sort of experience with that Daniel Perrott. Hopefully I said his name correctly there. But, yeah, Fitzy, I was looking at the shots gained because I actually faded him over here for round one. So, I'm not as favorable on him for this sort of week. But it's been a real tough scene tee to green, losing in all three categories, losing about 0.5 stroke per round on approach, even around the green, where he's never been a strong around the green player, but he's never been terrible in the category. He's losing over 0.75 of a stroke per round. So I don't know. The caddy could be it. Sometimes it's just that vibe change out there for these players, and they get it rolling the right direction. Thoughts on Ryan Fox? So he's the kind of guy, we talked about some off the tee players that maybe aren't as good in that category. It's the opposite for Ryan Fox. Ryan Fox had been the beneficiary of some golf courses that really fit his game, courses where you could bomb and gouge it like what you had with the Houston Open. And now he gets a little bit of a reality check. This golf course this week's a lot tighter. You had the whole Kevin Na, what he shoot like an 18 on one hole around this sort of golf course. I'm not saying that's going to happen to Ryan Fox, but that's at least in the realm of outcomes around here. Unlike at Houston, where there was literally only one tee shot where you could get into trouble. So that's the main thing I'd say with Ryan, but I don't know. The form's great. He's gaining a whole bunch of the putter. He's a really good putter, always, pretty much every tour that he's been on. This iron play, though, has been what's carrying his game. He's not the most consistent in that category, but he's been, maybe it's the golf course is setting up well, but he's been playing some solid golf. Deep dive on Captain Kirk. So, yeah, I hit you with that one a little bit earlier. If you have a question, I will get to them. Just hold on tight. We'll get to it at some point. So, thoughts on Cooch, Hoffman, and Kirk? The Cooch course history, by the way, good call on that one, is unbelievable. I mean, when I saw this the last few years, I was like, holy shit, Kuchar must love this golf course or something. Sure, he missed the cut last year, but T3, T2, and then another top 10 over there 5 years ago. And even his second worst finish, I mean, it's crazy to say, his second worst finish over the last 5 years is a top 12 finish. So I'm not playing Kuchar this week, but there's a really good argument to be made for going out there and playing him. Hoffman and Kirk, we already talked about Kirk a little bit, so I won't reiterate that one. But Hoffman, he's playing solid on approach. Like, at least before the last few weeks, I know Hoffman was playing well on approach. I haven't checked up on him in quite a while, actually. I know the form fell off just a little bit, but it's a lot of the same. Short game's the issue. He's been really struggling with the putter here in 2025, but as you can see there, the iron playing off the tee play has been solid for a while. And I don't even think it's the last 12. I think if we zoom out and look at the last 24 round sample size, yeah, it's the exact same, right? Tee to green gaining, really good on approach like you'd expect. He's still a world-class iron player and just cannot make anything drop with the putt. So I would say I like Cooch the most, probably Hoffman second, and then Kirk the third. So you got a 2v2 for me. Okay, so Coco and Tommy or Spieth and Cantlay. That's the second one for me, man. I'd go with some Spieth and Cantlay. And I think that's the way that you had that structured, but let me know if I got that wrong. Is Damon a good fit this week? So I'm kind of surprised about the chalk on a Joel Damon, to be personally honest. I thought that he'd be like 2-3% owned, and I saw him in some projections closer to like 7% ownership. Not my favorite play this week. Course fit is fine. He's accurate off the tee. He's a good iron player. So he does a lot of the things like a Kirk do. Those accurate guys, like even a Brian Harmon. Like he's a decent course fit around here, but not a good enough course fit where he should be like the main chalk in the 6K range. So I'm personally a little bit cooler on him than I think most other people are. Mike says, in single entry, do I pay more attention to ownership? So it's actually the exact opposite for me, Mike. In ownership in single entries gets more polarized. And what I mean by that is that the higher owned guys out there in single entry get even higher owned, and the lower owned guys in single entry get even lower owned. What I do in single entry, because in most cases you're entering in a much smaller contest than what you would be in GPPs, is I don't worry about the ownership as much because I'm only entering against a couple hundred other people. I don't have to have a bunch of sub 5%ers to get leverage against 200 other people, right? It's much easier to beat only 200 entries as opposed to something like 20 to 50,000 like you have in some of those big GPPs this week. So it's actually the opposite. And it's not like it doesn't matter. You still have to have some leverage. It's just that you can get almost infinite leverage on your 6 and 7K range guys. As long as you're not taking chalk at that portion of the board, you can find some guys at like 0% ownership. Like literally, you can be the only guy that has some guys down there in that 7K range. And that can be where you get different to the field. You got to stick to Gary Woodland again. Okay, I hear you on that. By the way, I love Gary down here from the same town that I'm from. He said played well here without the putting too. Yeah, I got to say in general, man, Gary's looking like the old Woodland, and that's a scary thing for the Tories. I mean, he was a top level player before he left. Not the postman. Yeah, sorry, I had to spill the beans on him, Mick. I know you like him this week too. How am I feeling about your guy, Ariel, right? Ariel, as some people will call him. You know, I'm not the biggest course fit fan of him, but I've got to say that Harry is extremely talented, the kind of guy that at this stage of his career is just a whole lot better than what you had last year. And I would say he's a little bit underpriced. Like you could put him in the 8K range. You could swap him over there with Sam Stevens at 8K. And I don't think anyone would bat an eye at that sort of pricing. So I don't think he's the worst play. It's just not my favorite. Like Fowler that we're going to talk about here in a second. I hate to say it, but I actually like Fowler more. And I'm sure I'll give you guys the reasoning, but I do. Novak sucks. Can't play that guy. You shut up. I know you're playing Novak this week, Nick, and I am too. So I'll be right there along with you. Rio as a lower owned value. So he's playing good golf. The one thing I'll say about Hisatune is that he's been short game dependent. A few weeks ago, we saw him gain like 8 strokes in the short game categories. Last time out, it was a little bit more ball striking heavy, a little bit more balanced, I should say, across the 4 stat categories. So I'm okay with it. I'm better on him than most plays in that range. Like I'd much rather have an informed guy, even if it is the short game carrying him, than guys that are out of form and complete slapdicks in that range. But you are going to pay for it with some ownership. Is there danger off the tee with like OB, trees, and etc.? Yes, there is, Brian. Hey, not every week you're going to be able to do the full deep dive. So I know you said that you couldn't watch all my videos. All good. Trust me, I get it, right? Life's busy. We're all busy out here. Yes, there are. So Kevin Na knows the best. He made an 18 on the hole, getting literally lost in the woods. But you've got some natural areas, not so much water. I think it's only 4 of the 18 holes that actually have water in play, but there's definitely some danger out there, which, by the way, if you haven't already smashed the like button, guys, go ahead and do so right now. Thoughts on Cole and Harmon. So I already gave my thoughts on them before, Michael. You might want to scroll back a little bit, but I think both are decent fits. Yeah, he's on the short list. I like that you guys like the puns there. Late AM, early PM for Showdown. Yeah, that's what I'm looking at too, Brian. I think that if you go with the late AM and the early PM guys, you might get like a 0.2, a 0.3 shot advantage, but that is contingent on the weather forecast not changing. So make sure you stay on top of that. Any thoughts on Matty Fitz? So I hope he could turn it around, but the idea for using him is that you would want to go out there and play him at low ownership. If you don't need to get different, if you're not actively looking for a way to get leverage against the field, I don't love the play because you've got guys around him that are better on paper that I personally preferred my player pool, but they are higher owned, right? So there's always a time and place for getting to a low owned pivot. It's just deploy it in the right format, right? A single entry, you might be getting a little bit too cute with that sort of play. But if you're in the big $5 or big $20 GPP this week, that sort of play makes a whole lot of sense. Don't sleep on Nap. Yeah, nap time out there for those that celebrate. Homa or Cam Young? Why are you asking these disgusting questions, Nick? Homa or Cam Young? Are we really choosing between those two? I will say one of those two is in my player pool, so it's got to be Cam Young. He's the one that I'm using this week, but they are lost. And if you're using one of those two, I got to say, just because I'm playing Cam Young does not mean that you guys should be playing them out there. You've got to have some balls of steel. You've got to know what you're getting yourself into. Like there's a very good chance they go out there and miss the cut, but they are some of the few players in the field that have actually won on tour before. So that counts for something as well. Neither. So scam Young if you must. Yeah, that's my answer on it too, Frank. I'm right there with you. So thoughts on Chan Kim. So Chan Kim's a high birdie percentage guy. Last year was a top 30 player out there in birdie or better percentage. that is gold when it comes to DraftKings scoring. So I'm okay with the Chan Kim. He's maybe not my favorite play on paper because the form could be better than what he's had recently. And just to show you the shots gained metrics to give you the actual look at those, let's bring those up. So you can see here, off the tee has been his issue lately, losing about 2/3 of a stroke per round. Also the putter, same exact thing. But he's been good with the irons and good around the green. So usually, I mean, he's a long player off the tee, hits the ball a long way, but that Florida swing, just hitting too many water balls for Chan. Any love for McGreevy? Yes. I mean, how could you not want to like McGreevy when you take a look at some of these ball striking stats recently? So just to spill the beans on that one as well, you can see over here gaining over half a stroke both per round off the tee and on approach. That is one of the best numbers in the entire field. So yes, definitely some interest. Jesper has been balling this year, but do you think he's burned out? Yeah, so I do worry about that with guys that are playing as much as what you have with Svenny, but I don't think it's a massive concern because he's the kind of guy that played a lot on the DP World Tour as well. Maybe not as much as like guys like an Eric Cole, Ben Griffin that are playing literally every single week, but I'm at like a 6 out of 10 on him. I think he's okay. Doug Gim or Chan Kim? I'd go Doug Gim because he's the one I'm playing in my pool. What's going on, Phil? He said my boy Luke, my boy Phil down there. And yeah, let's talk about Fowler. So we'll get to questions a little bit later on as well. But I want to talk about some of these diamonds in the rough that I have for you. So first off is Ricky Fowler here at $7,700. So I took him for the top 10 at plus 700. And Ricky, after getting on the TGL, right, getting to, I don't know if it was that competitive atmosphere that brought out the old Ricky Fowler, but we've seen a lot better shots gained metrics from him recently. Now, over the last 24 rounds, you can't see it quite as much. You go to the last 24 rounds, it's really ugly out there for Fowler. You can see, in fact, over that sort of period, he's only really gaining off the tee. And recently, though, it's a little bit better than what we've had over that sample size. So if we go up here to Ricky, who, what is he, $7,400? There he is, $7,700. He's still only really gaining off the tee, but the iron play has started to get a lot better than what we had for last year. And on this surface, right, he's from down here in South Florida. He plays on these overseeded greens. He's historically a lot better than what we've had this year. Now, 2025, it's part of the reason that he started off so slowly this year. It's part of the reason that he fell off so drastically in 2024 is that the ball striking just went from like above average to average, and then the putter did the same thing. You can't be a PGA Tour player if you're just average at everything, right? You've got to have some strengths out there with your shots gained profile. A guy like Ricky Fowler is now getting back to having that strength off the tee. And if you take a look at his career numbers in overseas, this is just for 2025 that we have over here on the right. He gains close to a half a stroke per round. So he's more of a long-term fit than I'm looking at. And I play him at courses that aren't off the tee heavy, right? Where you don't have to be a bomber. You don't have to be one of the most accurate players in the field to go out there and succeed. I like that for guys like Ricky Fowler. And the off the tee play has actually been a positive for him lately. So maybe this is an even better course fit because of that. I've also got a Patrick Rogers in some lineups. So he's over there at $7,400, also at sub 6% ownership. And just over a month ago, right, he was an 8K range player in this sort of field. He was chalk because he was gaining like 1.5, 2 shots gained per round. He had some close calls when it came to going out there and actually winning events. I mean, our guy DGen75, right, didn't he give Patrick Rogers out, who, by the way, I'm pretty sure he's like his least favorite player out there in the world. And he gave him out as a play for a week, and he went out there and nearly won the golf tournament. Like, we got to remember that guys like Patrick Rogers were the talk of the town out there a month and a half ago, and now he's $7,400. No one's playing him out there in lineups. Like, I'll buy the dip on that sort of player all day. And Alex Smalley, he's super chalky out there in your lineup. So unlike some of the other guys that we're going to talk about here, he's not nearly as low owned, but I did take him for a top 10 bet there at plus 700. So he's the kind of player that I wanted to point out from that perspective. Really like the form with the iron play and off the tee. He's been one of the best ball strikers that we've had in the entire field. In fact, over his last 12 round sample size, you can see gaining over half a stroke per round there off the tee. And if you zoom out a little bit, so we go to the last 24 round sample size, give a few more events out there to actually look at. Where is he? I'm blind physically and also not literally blind, but you can see there, right, closer to neutral over there with the iron play, but still excellent in the other shots gained categories. And where Smalley really plays his best is from 150 yards and in. He's not always the best long iron player that we have out there on tour. So at a golf course now where you don't have as many long irons as what you had at the Houston Open, I think that that's a huge positive out there for Alex Smalley. So in terms of raw projection, he's one of the top projecting players in this range and somebody that I'll be actively getting over the field on. Now, guys like Thorbjorn Olesen, a Ryan Gerard, Gerard on here. We already talked them up over there on Monday. I obviously am still playing those sort of players, but for my full takes on those, feel free to go ahead and check out the live stream from Monday. But we knew Ryan Gerard was going to be chalk, so the 10% ownership there really doesn't change things. And same thing with Smalley. Like, I knew he was going to be chalk before I went out there and took him for my player pool. It's just that if I'm using those sort of guys, I've got to differentiate elsewhere, right? I've got to compensate for that sort of ownership. And the sort of players that can help me do that are your Sam Burns, right? Who we can take it sub 10% in this range. Even a Matt McNeely, who I've got closer to 11, 12%. Same thing with a JT Poston, who I've got it closer to 11% ownership, right? By taking guys that are just a little bit lower owned over there in that 8K range, maybe opposed to those 20%ers in a McCarthy, or even a 15%er over there with Bud Colley, or how you can afford to take a guy who is a little bit higher owned over here in the 7K range. So as you'll see when we talk about lineup construction a little bit later on, it's all about the giving and taking out there with all these players and their ownership, right? Just compensating for it across the board. We've got a Doug Gim as a play I wanted to point out as well. So he is sub 5% owned. Doug Gim, by the way, form has kind of fallen off a little bit. And what I've noticed with Doug Gim is that he's perpetually in good form. He always has good tee to green form, it looks like, over there with Doug Gim. And when he's chalky, he normally falls flat on his face, because I feel like what happens is that people chase Doug Gim. He'll go out there, have a couple really good ball striking weeks, usually resulting in like top 25 finishes, and then people will jump on and he'll be like 10, 15% owned. That week is normally when he'll finish like T50, even go out there and miss the cut at times. And then he'll start the same process over again, because he's an accurate guy off the tee. He's a really good iron player from 150 yards and in, but he's not a top tier talent. Like, he's a scrub. There's a reason why he's $7,000. But if you can time up these scrubs correctly, sometimes you can find the absolute nuts. And this is the sort of guy that went to University of Texas. He's used to playing this sort of golf. He's always been that high pedigree kind of guy. And kind of like a Sam Ryder that I talked about before, I only play him when he's lower owned and lower priced than he should be. This week, he's cheaper than what he has been for pretty much all this year. And he's also lower owned than what he has been for most of this year. So this is another example of me going out there and quote unquote buying the dip on a player and trying to get him for a little bit of a bounce back. And you can say the same thing about an Antoine Rosner. He was also the talk of the town a few weeks ago. A lot of people playing him as a value play here towards the beginning of 2025. Now I've got him at sub 1% ownership. So I mean, just the absolute nuts when it comes to trying to find a lower owned play. He's $6,700. So it also gives you quite a bit of salary flexibility up there towards the top end of the board. And kind of like what you'll see with the last few plays that we talk about here, like Manicero is the next one here. These DP World Tour guys that aren't overly long off the tee, that are really good from 150 yards and in, are usually the absolute nuts at these shorter DP World Tour courses. Like, when I'm playing at a course that's sub 7,000 yards on the DP World Tour, my first look over there for the strokes board or birdie board over there for like Prize Picks Underdog, when I was playing DP World Tour stuff, would be guys like Rosner, Manicero, because they're just perfect for this style of venue. This week, because they're from the DP World Tour, they're not in the best form. They're not going to be super highly owned. Like, I know we had a question about Jesper Svensson before, who is another guy coming over from that side. He's a little bit longer off the tee, right? He's a bigger guy, hits the ball longer way. He still fits those style golf courses, right? I mentioned I thought he was a decent play for this kind of week, but Rosner, guys like Manicero, are even better at these sort of tracks. They're cheaper and they're lower owned out there in almost every single case. So Rosner, the form, maybe not the best, a little bit better form over there for Manicero. You can see actually top 50 with the total model ranking, top 40 ranking over there with the long-term fit. And the last player we're going to go through here is going to be a Peter Malnati here at $6,100. I bet him for a top 20 at plus 1,500, which I thought the odds on that were just disrespectful for somebody that's a multiple-time tour winner. He's 0.3% owned. If you take a look at the event history, it is very surprising out there for Peter. I did not think that he's played that well here over the years, but over the last 5 years, he has 3 made cuts out of his 4 starts, and he has 2 top 25 finishes over that stretch as well. Now, he's never gotten into the top 20 yet, right? And that's the key word, that 3-letter word there, yet. He's not gotten to the top 20 quite yet. This year, maybe that's where he can improve on that. So it's a low owned play for a reason, right? He's 15-1 for the top 20 for a reason out there in our exposure. But you can see he's really good on this overseeded surface. And I was going through the shots gained metrics because I pay attention to Malnati. He's not one of my favorite players, but I think he's a very interesting cat. And he is on a lot of the prop boards. So try and track him as much as I can over there for Underdog and Prize Picks. And what I noticed is that the last few weeks, putter's been on fire, but the iron play was gone. A few weeks before that, he wasn't making that many putts. He was about neutral out there at the putter, but his iron play was on out there for a few weeks out there. And also the driver in general in 2025 has been a lot better. And it's noticeably different, a lot better than what he had in 2024. So it kind of feels like he's finding his game slowly, like he's finding one piece and then, it's another piece he's going out there and finding the next week. If he can piece it all together, it could be that top 20 finish that we're looking for. So that's why I took the shot down there at plus 1,500. And it's another one of these shorter tracks. So you don't have to have all that length off the tee to be a stud. Maybe that's why he's had those top 25 finishes at this golf course, because it's not that style of track where you have to be the Ludwig Bears and hit the ball 350 yards. So those are a few examples of some of the diamonds in the rough that I'm playing down low. Of course, guys, for access to all of these projections, every single player that I'm taking, that is what the Patreon page is for. Again, link in the description of the video to go out there and check that out. But it's not just to go out there and give you guys to go out there and play yourself. It's to give you a peek behind the process, right? Because with my players down low, with the exception of Alex Smalley, who I made sure to give that disclaimer on, they were all low owned, right? All the guys that I'm looking to add to my player pool to get that leverage into my lineups were 5-6% owned at the very most. And then down here in that 6K range, right, for the most part, they were sub 1% owned. Sure, Mateo's closer to 1.3%, maybe a little bit higher owned than some of the other guys down here in the 6K range. But that's where you can get all the leverage you need out there in your lineups. And this week, I'm going heavy on the GPP exposure. I'm playing 150 lineups over there in the $5 GPP. And though I don't necessarily need the salary down here in the 6K range, the top end of the board here, I don't have a whole lot of love for a lot of guys towards the top. I'm playing them just because I got to spend the salary at some point. If you wanted to leave salary on the table, I actually don't think it's a bad week to go out there and do so and maybe be even a little bit more aggressive about leaving that salary on the table. But guys like Manicero, it's not even the salary that I like about it. It's the leverage, right? You're not going to find a ton of guys in the 7K range that are sub 1% owned. You might find one, maybe two of them, right? Or that are sub 1% owned. That's the added benefit of going down into that 6K range. If you can find guys that you like a Rosner, Manicero, that fit this style of golf course, then you could be really cooking over there with your exposure. So that's it for the players that I really wanted to go through together. We're going to do a little bit of contest selection over here in a second. We're going to go through some of the best contests that we still have on the board for DraftKings. Also some lineup construction as well. So we'll talk through kind of the thought process when it comes through to actually building a few lineups. But I do want to go through any last second player pool questions that you have. And if you guys haven't already subscribed to the channel, make sure you do so as well. I'm going to be doing round 2 through 4 live streams. It'll be over there on the Ship It Nation YouTube. And of course, all the prop and betting stuff out there for rounds 2 through 4, which we still got to talk about it for round 1. So if you guys are here for underdog prize picks, we'll be getting to that here in the next 10 minutes on that side. That's where we leave off. So thoughts on Lashley and Molinax. So not the biggest fan of both. If I had to choose between the two, it'd probably be a Lashley, just because the off the tee fit's a little bit more favorable for Nasty Nate. But yeah, maybe a 4, 5 out of 10 on both of those sort of guys. Personally, not my favorites. You like Ricky and his 3-ball. You'll have to let me know, Jordan, who he's playing against and what kind of odds you're getting, because I could be a sucker for it, man. I really like him this week. He said also thoughts on Mitchell and Harry. So I'm assuming you mean Harry Hall. Harry Hall I'm at a 6 out of 10 on. I've got to say, he's just, I think he's a better player than most people give him credit for. So higher than most. And then Mitchell, a 4 out of 10. I play him at courses where you've got to bomb it, where driving, being long and straight is really rewarded. He's not my favorite play, but I've got to say, Kim, and we kind of didn't mention this one before, but look at the ownership, right? He is the lowest owned guy outside of Sam Burns. That's 8K plus, or he's the second lowest owned player. That's got to stand for something, right? If you're looking for a leverage play, he's less than half the ownership of guys like a Daniel Berger and a Denny McCarthy. That would be the argument for taking him. Did we talk about Sam Stevens? So a little bit. Yeah, we mentioned him as a decent play at $8,000. I've got him at literally a 5 out of 10. I really have no lean in either direction. He's just kind of there for me. And yeah, you can tell I'm not playing him, right? If he's just kind of there for me. But I also don't think he's the worst play either. You got 1 or 2 Jeremy Pauls. Okay. Is this a WBB track? So Webb. Okay. Is it assuming the question there? You love all the olds this week? Oh, God. I don't know if I can get there on Webb because he hasn't really done anything recently. But yeah, in theory, man, is this the kind of track that you could play a Webb at? Do I do any stocks, Luke? You're kicking yourself for not putting any closes. No, I don't, Phil. I've dabbled in it a little bit out there in some companies that I wanted to support, especially like in the energy industry out there with anything that's an electrical engineering company. I try and support some of that stuff too, but not a whole bunch, man. I'm not super versed in all the terminology either. So don't kill me for probably saying the wrong thing there. Let's go through some Draftkings stuff. So in terms of the contests that are available, I like to go through those. But at this point of the week, a lot of the best contests are gone. Like, for example, they did have an 18 max. That's $10 a pop. So that $180 contest that you can max enter that we try and get into as much as we possibly can. That one is already filled. Also, a lot of the big single entries have filled. So you can see over here, you still have this 60K long drive. That's probably one of the better single entries that you can enter out there. But a lot of the main ones have started to fill. So you've got some smaller ones like the $33, the $12 single entries that you can still enter. So this is the 33 that I was talking about before. For me, though, it's a big $5 GPP week. It's not the best payout structure out there in the $5 GPP, but that's usually my go-to out there for main slate. So a lot of what we talk about with the lineup construction is going to be from that sort of angle, because that's how I'm looking at this sort of golf tournament. And in my main slate exposure, this is a week where I'm actively looking to get different to the field. And you can probably tell by my exposure in that 6-7K range, I'm trying to get as much leverage as possible, because if I don't believe in a lot of the chalk towards the top end of the board, then you don't want to be playing a whole bunch of guys that are 20-25% owned. So I'm avoiding as much as that as I can. But even down there in that like 7-8K range, I don't like a lot of these guys that are like 15% owned. So when you're building lineups, maybe you get away with having 1-2 of those guys out there in your build, but your other 3-4 spots, even 4 or 5 spots out there in that lineup should be, I don't want to say like at most 5% owned, but should at least be leverage plays compared to some of the other guys around them. So we're going to start off with this lineup with a Tommy Fleetwood at $10,700. Our second man in, we're going to throw in a Denny McCarthy. So I've got Fleetwood over 20%. Same thing with a Denny McCarthy. Those are going to be the two chalky players that we go out there and use. And because we didn't really get different with one of our 2 spend ups there, it's going to take us off of guys like Ryan Gerard. Right? Ryan Gerard's closer to that 10 to 15% mark. You can't really afford to take that sort of player if you're going to take so much ownership up there towards the top. And this could be done when you're hand building like we're talking about right now. I personally do my lineups on an optimizer, so it's done a little bit differently. But in an optimizer, right, you can either set a product ownership cap, you can set a cumulative ownership cap if you want to do it that way, which is adding up all the ownership. But you can force in your optimizer to not give you all that kind of chalk together. If you're using cumulative ownership, right, go out there, calculate a number that makes sense. It could be around 70% a lot of weeks, I'd say, over there from that cumulative ownership perspective. And that'd be pretty aggressive with making sure that you have that leverage. Or with your product ownership, you can try and cater it towards the contest that you're entering, right? You could choose a product ownership number to go out there and choose for your optimizer and keep it below that. That gives you less than one theoretical dupe out there with every lineup that you're doing. Now, this isn't a time where we can go through all the tutorial and details when it comes to doing that sort of thing, but it is to say that this kind of thought process that we're going through together, right, while trying to force in some lower owned plays, is something that you can automate over there with your optimizer as well. So for your next man in, right, we're going to try and get it a little bit more different, which is even taking us off guys like a Ben Griffin. Like Ben Griffin's got some ownership behind him. So I know we had questions about the Matty Fitz play before. Like, that might not be a terrible idea to get to here, even at Harry Hall, that's a little bit lower owned. But my personal favorite might be a Ricky Fowler, because he's close to that 5-6% ownership mark, and he's given us some leverage off of that chalk. So let's go with a Fowler. Let's go with an Andrew Novak there too. Novak's not going to be overly popular this week. And then even if we're going to take some ownership here, I would rather it be somebody that's a little bit lower owned than the guys around him. So let's take a Sam Burns up there, $8,600, right? He's going to be like 7-8% owned, but compared to the guys around him, he's like half the ownership of all of those sort of players. So in this kind of lineup, you might have 2 pieces of chalk, like a Fleetwood and a McCarthy, but as long as your last mid in here isn't super mega chalky, and because you're only left with $6,500, I mean, pretty much no matter who you play. In fact, yeah, no matter who you play down there at $6,500, you should be different enough out there in any contest that you enter. So that would include the big $5, big $20 GPP. When you've got 4 guys that you can classify as pivots in a lineup, that might even be overdoing it a little bit. In fact, if you wanted to play one more chalky player, you might be able to get away with it out there from time to time. But if you want to be safe out there from your lineup construction segment, force in 4 pivots, right? You have 4 guys at sub 10% in your lineup. you're going to be good to go 99% of the time out there with your exposure. So that's the idea when it comes to actually putting together lineups. It's not who you play, it's how you play them. And right, just because I clicked guys over there on the right for this lineup together, it doesn't even mean I'm using them over there in my player pool, right? It was more so just the thought exercise of showing you guys what you should be thinking about when you're going together and actually clicking names. So let me see if there's any last second DFS questions down there in the chat. If not, we're going to transition over there into the prop side of things. That's where we're going to be talking about some underdog and prize picks props. So you can see, right, some props that we're going to talk about here in a second. But if you're just here for DFS, still enjoy you guys stopping by and showing all the love here on the content. Go ahead, smash that like button if you guys haven't already. And like I said, make sure to stop by for all the content throughout the rest of the weekend. So where did we leave off? So thoughts on Del Solar. So, hey, if you're going to play Del Solar, do it in Showdown or do it with a first-round leader bet, because he's the kind of guy that's really good for an 18-hole sample size at times, extremely volatile player, but can't keep it together for 4 rounds. So I would say, man, if you're going to play him, use him in Showdown or first-round leader. Who are some of the guys I like for first-round leader? So look at that. A little bit of a good segue between those two. So I don't know if I'd really be leaning towards like the morning or the PM guys, but kind of like I was saying before with the weather aspect, you could look for some of the late morning guys or maybe some of the early PM guys out there for first round leaders. And I would say, like, look at your player pool, find guys that you already like to begin with. And if you can find some guys with a tee time like that, that's what I would do for first round leader. Alrighty, let's talk through some prop stuff now. So we've got the averages here on the board out here for the Texas Open. And I think it's going to play a little bit easier than what we had for last year, at least for round number 1. And the reason why I say that is the weather for Friday, Saturday looks pretty dicey. And I don't think they want the players to get off to an overly hard start. Like when they know that there's going to be 20, 30 mile an hour winds potentially for Friday, Saturday could be like 15, 20 mile an hour winds. They don't want these players to have 3 days in a row before the Masters where they're just getting completely hit over the head. So I think that they're going to try and soften up the pin locations a little bit. And with a lot of sustained winds out of the forecast, right? It's at most like 6-7 miles an hour for a lot of the round out there. I think you're going to see around an even par scoring average. Now, the thing I'll add on top of that is that I think the morning is going to play a little bit easier than the afternoon, partially because the winds later in the day are going to kick up just a little bit, but also because of the temperatures. It's going to go from 70 degrees, which is very moderate, cool over there in the morning. In fact, they even have some cloud cover, which is going to help them leave the greens more receptive. There's going to be less evaporation, right? The greens aren't going to get quite as crusty, quite as fast over there if there's some cloud cover out there. But by the time they get to the afternoon and it's 90 degrees, it's hot, they're baking out there, that sort of thing, I think it's going to get a little bit harder, right? And if you can add that wind on top of that, maybe that's a half a stroke difference. So out here with these scoring averages, I think that the morning wave could play like a quarter to even a half a stroke under par. Your PM wave could play anywhere between even par and maybe a half a stroke over par, I'd say, over there with that scoring average. So with that in mind, birdie average for the morning probably going to be closer to like 3.4, maybe even 3.5 per round. And the PM average maybe a little better, right? Maybe like 3.3, 3.35 per round, right? Over there for the PM wave. So you got to make slight adjustments over here to these averages. But in general, I do think scoring is going to get a hair easier. But in terms of what I actually entered over there for round 1, the rest of my exposure, you guys can also find over there on the Patreon page. So on top of all those projections that I have for DFS, I also have the prop tier where you can find all the underdog and prize pick stuff that I'm doing. But here's a couple slips that I've already entered myself. So first off, you have this Jordan Spieth prop for the under 2.5 bogeys. Over here on Caesars William Hill, you can see that he's minus 130 for his under. So that is a slight value there. But over here on the Draftkings side, he's minus 135 out there for his under at 2.5 bogeys. So a little bit of plus EV value, you'd say, on that sort of number. A player with elite tier course history as well. And then you've got this Matty Fitzpatrick prop, who he doesn't have a line on any books to go out there and compare to. But some of the other guys that they have up at 70.5 are in way better form than what you have with Matty Fitz and are better players as well. Like, for example, Sam Burns has much better odds to win this week. He's much higher priced out there at DFS, and he's even minus 145 for his over. Now, Tommy Fleetwood is one of the favorites this week. He's one of the best form players that we have in the field. He's at the same number, and sure, he's juiced under, but are we really to believe that a guy out of form like Matty Fitz, who, by the way, over his last 12 measured rounds, is losing about a stroke per round over his last 12 rounds, is going to be like even money at 70.5? Like, there's no way. I mean, look at this, right? Tony Finau is even minus 130 for the over. So no actual line to compare to, but I can guarantee you that if he had a line, he'd be even more juice out there towards the over compared to some of those other players. So I would say that there's plus EV value there, even though we don't have that line for comparison. And then the same thing over there with Jordan Spieth. And because it's on underdog, you get a 3.24x payout. So they give you a little bit of an extra payout there. And then over here on the prize pick side, I have this under on Denny McCarthy, and then this under on Corey Connors birdies. Now, and to go through the plus EV value on that, there's also value on both sides of this one. So first off, I got the Corey Connors prop, which is minus 130 for the under. If we go over here to Fanduel, they also have them posted, I believe. So let's see. So yeah, Corey Connors minus 140 out there for the under on birdies. Real easy to see why, right? I mean, you go to the averages. Average was 3.25 per round. PM wave, maybe it's like 3.3, 3.4 per round. He'd have to gain 1.5, maybe even a little bit over that, birdies to go out there and get 5 per round. And sure, Corey Connors has won here twice. He's got really good course history, but is he going to go out there and gain 1.5 birdies or better per round? No, right? In fact, if you take a look at his last 12 measured rounds here, he's gone under it more than he's gone over. And that includes a win over that sort of sample size. So that's why I like the under on Corey Connors there. And then the Denny McCarthy one isn't as much of value, but I really do like him this weekend. I wanted to find a way to get a 3x payout. So you can see here, he's minus 120 for his under. If you go over here to Draftkings, I think he's minus 125, but let me double check on the exact number over there for Denny McCarthy. So yeah, actually minus 130 now over there for the under on DraftKings. So yeah, another one where it's slight plus EV value in that direction. And because we have an over and under, you get a 3x payout. Now you might say, oh, over and an under. Why don't you do that on underdog, right? And get a slightly better payout? Well, that's because those two props have already been bumped in that direction. So just to show you what I'm talking about, you go to Denny McCarthy over here and he's already 0.94x out there in that direction. And then we find Corey Connors over here, and you're going to see that he's also already juiced towards the under. So if we took that same combination on the underdog side, you'd actually only get about 2.6x right out there with those two plays. So that's why we did those over here on Prize Picks, taking advantage of that plus EV value, and also why we took the Spieth and Fitz prop over here on this side, right? Gives us an ability to find the plus EV slips over there in each site and also get the best payout available. So if you're looking for that sort of analysis yourself, I post all these stat averages over there for my Patreon members as well as weather reports out there for every single round to help you out with all of your exposure and all the different bets that I'm placing. So you can go out there, tell the ones that you feel like you agree with. But even more than just that, right? I try and teach you guys how to be a better of golf. Teach you what to look for in stat averages, what the stat averages are for any given round, and how I go out there and find the best props available. Because, you know, if you follow my stuff long enough, you'll quickly realize how much respect these books have for me. And this isn't even just me like tooting my own horn. You won't see anyone out there in the industry that moves golf lines faster than what I do. And it's not even like I have the biggest following. Trust me, there are Twitter channels out there, even YouTube channels that get more follows out there on these sort of bets. But I move lines a lot quicker than they do, even though they have more people tailing them. Some of those people out there on Twitter, because of the kind of respect that the book lines makers have for me. So these ones haven't moved yet. So I've got to say, I guess I'm kind of contradicting myself saying that right there. But hey, grab the value while you can is I guess what I'm saying out there at the same time. So for the rest of that, you guys can check out the Patreon page for all of that. Let me see if there's any questions that you guys have over here on the prop side of things. And yeah, any betting questions too. So if you have any like matchups you want my take on, any outright bets as well, I am more than willing to go through those as well. Let me leave off. He said, I know I said it would be a decent idea to leave some salary. Yes. My thoughts on playing 3 people over 9K, like a Fleetwood, Spieth, McCarty. So I'm actually not fading. I'm not leaving a whole bunch of salary on the table myself, Chandler. So I think it is a decent idea if you want to get different to the field, but I'm not personally like pushing it that far. I've got enough leverage plays to make it work. But yeah, playing 3 guys over 9K is not a bad idea because what it forces you to do is go down to the 6K range. And part of what we were talking about with the DFS section before, and I'll bring that up here real quickly over there on the spreadsheet, is that these guys down low, you're looking at next to no ownership on. I mean, sub 1% ownership on somebody like a Rosner, 1.3% ownership over there on a Matteo Manicero. I kind of like being aggressive up top, especially if there's like 3 9K guys that you like. I guess it's a 10, right? And then 2 9Ks over there with those other 2. But that kind of lineup construction forces you on to the Maniceros of the world. So I'm not against that lineup construction whatsoever, man. And I think it could be a good one over there for this week. That's all I've got over there for my exposure, guys. Best of luck over there with everything that you guys are doing. Go ahead, stop on by for the round 2 through 4 live streams. As I said, those will be on the Ship It Nation YouTube channel, so you'll want to make sure that you're subscribed over there as well, so you don't miss any of that to come. But I hope to see your names out there towards the top end of those GPPs, just as long as it's not out there in the big $5. I've got my sights out there in that 50K prize. So best of luck over there in every other contest that you guys are entering. But all jokes aside, I hope it's a big week out there for the community. I hope we can go out there, maybe even cash an outright bet out there as well. That'd be sweet after a few weeks of not having that outright in our pocket. And getting ready out there for the Masters as well, right? We've got the biggest tournament of the year coming out next week. So it'd be great to get some momentum heading into that event and, to line our pockets as well, right? Get some extra exposure out there for the major championship. Let's see how it all works out here for this week. So I appreciate you guys, as I said out there before, and I'll see you guys out there for all the rest of the content this week.